What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday. And today I have good news for you, well, possibly good news. If you don't like the cleanup sessions, we're not cleaning up anything today, so isn't that nice for you? I do have one bit that I have to get out of the way, and that is that if you ordered some merchandise from me when we had the pre-orders up recently, everything has come in except Soundwave wovens. That's what I'm waiting on. So if you had a Soundwave woven attached to your order, I'm waiting. If you don't have a Soundwave order, or a Soundwave woven attached to your order and you haven't got a shipping notice from me, please reach out to me. But today we're going to carry through with our 4th annual third-party awards. This is where we talk about the best of all the scales, paint, sculpt, transformation, etc. It's completely subjective. It's 100% my opinion. It's not meant to be objective whatsoever. There is one thing that's relatively objective because it's actually a viewer vote, but with the exception of that, it's pretty much subjective. Every now and then I feel kind of urges pulling at me to choose something because of objectivity, but for the most part it's pretty subjective choices. But it is good fun. And it makes me want to go back and watch the other ones and see who has won in the past. I always forget. I know DX9 won Company of the Year last year. I know New Age won the first year, I believe. I can't remember. Fans Toys has won at least once. It doesn't matter. I'll watch it. You watch it too. We'll both watch it. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2021 Third Party Awards. And we'll start with the best Legends figures of the year. And we all know that this year, just like last year, there was no shortage of applicants. So our number one entry is New Age Shockwave. The Magic Square one was great as well. And as soon as I finished reviewing it, I remember thinking to myself, how could it get any better? And then I got the New Age one and I was like, oh, this way. But they're both great. New Age actually has 2 entries with their first set of Constructicons, which are clearly, at least in my opinion, the best set of Constructicons they put out, and maybe set the bar a little high in comparison to how the rest of the group was going to flake out, or shake out, which is what I should have said. But nonetheless, in a vacuum, these 2 were fantastic. Far better than the 2 sets that came after. Next, we have Iron Factory's Ultra Magnus. Finally, a third-party IDW-inspired Ultra Magnus that really does bring home the essence of that character, that really strikes at the heart of it, that finally feels the way that Ultra Magnus looked in the comics. Many have tried, but I think this is the only one that's really, truly successful. Next is Magic Square Perceptor. Still suffered from some of the same issues that we know Magic Square can have. However, there was something about this bot that it didn't matter what you did in regard to any of his joints, he ended up looking cool. I remember at one point purposefully trying to make him look doofy, and it still looked cool. And last, Zeta's aerial bots. I just have this one here, but really either of them will do. Just surprisingly fun, surprisingly straightforward, surprisingly nostalgic, and solid entries. And the winner for Best Legends Figure of the Year, in my opinion, goes to Magic Square Perceptor. I can make an argument for any of the other ones to win, don't get me wrong. And I don't have a dog in the fight, so I don't really care. But I don't think I personally had more fun with a Legends class figure the entire year. If you go back and just look at the pictures at the end of the video, you could tell that like the figure just lent itself to great poses. Just a really aesthetically striking figure and proportionately phenomenal. Moving on to the CHUG scale, which is, just what we kind of slangishly call the kind of mid-level tier of scale, like between Masterpiece and Legends. Commonly referred to as CHUG because of the old acronym of Classics, Hinkai, Universe, and Generations, but now that doesn't really apply anymore, but old habits die hard and such, right? So moving on to this scale, which MMC has dominated in the past, we'll go ahead and mention one of their entries this year, which is their Chrome Dome Rewind set. Just another set of figures that really hone in on the character, that really lock in to the elements of the book that made the character special, and supplied simultaneously an enjoyable experience with the figure, so to speak. Next, we'll move on to Planet X Shockwave. Just a real joy of a figure to experience, and really because, especially coming off the heels of some of their other releases, which have been a little weaker, this seemed like a back to formula, back to basics approach of getting the job done, and once again landed right in the pocket of where they usually are, which is pretty solid. Of course, we have to mention the HasLab crowdfunded Unicron. It gets a lot of gripes from people, but if you know, if you have this thing, it's impressive. And it's at minimum a conversation piece. Just the scale scale, sculpt detail, and presence of this thing alone, along with a pretty solid and sturdy build, make it a competitor this year for sure. Next, we have another MMC entry late in the game in the fourth quarter with their Rung figure. Just one of those figures or characters that I didn't think I'd ever get. And not only did we get one, but we got one that's pretty much a slam dunk. Little pricey, and that's going to be kind of a pattern moving forward in this particular conversation, but a little pricey, but ultimately worth the cost of admission because it captures something about the character. It doesn't seem soulless or lifeless in any way or at any time. It always feels like the character walked off the panels of the page and onto your shelf. But speaking of pricey, what needs to be mentioned was the Studio Series Hot Rod. This should really be the aim for the Hasbro mid-tier $20 figure, whatever it is, $20 to $25 figure. This should be the target. And if they landed this target all the time, you would see such a change in appreciation and respect for this line across the board. That being said, even at this price point, it does stand out as being an impressive piece, specifically in comparison to what they've done in the past. And the winner for this year, 100% goes to Unicron. And I'm going to tell you why in a quick story. I had a Halloween party recently at my house. It was a blast. Thanks for asking. And at that Halloween party were many people that don't know anything about this hobby of ours. And Unicron occupies space in the same room as a $1,400 statue, $1,000 combiners, etc., etc. Not to mention flame toys, not to mention 1/1 scale replicas, all sorts of cool stuff, right? And I heard from multiple people that evening, this must be the most valued piece in your entire collection. And it's not because it is, because it certainly is not. It's because of the presence it demands. In a year where we've been using the word unprecedented to death, it truly is an unprecedented piece. So, moving on to the masterpiece scale category, there wasn't a whole lot of choices to choose from, honestly. But nonetheless, the show must go on. And this may be, in fact, cheating. However, I don't care. I can do what I want. And yes, it's not one official release. It's the culmination of 5 releases. But that doesn't make it any less impressive. And that is the DX9 Menasor. If you would have gone back in time and told me years ago that Fans Toys, X-Transbots, and DX9 were all going to do a masterpiece scaled Menasor, the Fans Toys was going to stall out after 4 releases, the X-Transbots was going to be somewhat of a disaster, and the DX9 was going to be the most dependable, I would have laughed you out of the room. And yet, here we are. So it deserves its spot. But speaking of Fans Toys, number 2 is Dragstrip, a pretty solid release. Some strange choices, I think, in regard to combine mode, but as a specific or figure in a vacuum, a pretty stellar figure. Has that striking Fans Toys paint, has those Fans Toys proportions, has the bells and whistles, the weight, all the things that we love from the company. Plus, if you've seen pictures, a pretty interesting way to do the arm mode. A lot of interesting stuff here, and it deserves its spot. Number 3, Deformation Space Starscream. Very popular figure amongst fans due to the price and aesthetics, a nightmare of a transformation. But due to its impact and the message that I think it clearly sent to the official, not only will it be a historical release, but I think it's also noteworthy and deserves its spot here. Next up is X-Transbots Groove, awfully late release in the game. All of the things that X-Transbots does right are done right here, along with some bonus things like a transformation that doesn't want to make you claw your eyes out or breaks the figure during the process. Especially coming off of the heels of Coot, off the heels of the transformation complications regarding fuzz, it really found its rhythm here. And lastly, Robot Paradise Acoustic Wave. Many people think that I don't think this figure is good, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I think this figure is objectively great. My issues with this figure have more to do with how it feels to me. And I don't mean in a tactile way, I mean like in an emotional way. But there's no doubt that this figure has great materials, a great build, a great sculpt in regard to what it's trying to do, good articulation. Like it does a lot of things right. There's no doubt about it. In a year where we haven't got a ton of masterpiece releases, it's certainly going to stand out. But the winner for me is going to go to this Menasor. And I may be super biased here because I just love Menasor and I love the Stunticons. But the options, especially with the third party kind of updates and upgrades that I got from my friend, along with just how easily it went together. I know there were some issues getting the cars to snap onto the back, but when you compare the transformation of the body of this thing to the transformation of the trailer of X-Transbots, it's really a no-brainer. It has this tremendous presence. It looks fantastic, and it scratched a sentimental itch that I have with this set of characters that I wasn't sure would ever be scratched.
So I feel backed into a corner here. I don't know if I could choose anything else this year. If you're curious if what I would choose next, my answer would be groove. But let's continue. Now, these next couple categories don't require a whole bunch of time, but let's go. So, best painted. First entry, once again, Fans Toys drag strip for the reasons we've sort of already discussed. The next entry is Planet X Shockwave. Once again, reasons we've already discussed. And then our 3 new entries for 1, Kang Toys Dive Bomb, Firmament. You guys know how I feel about this company and the way that they handled the rollout for this Predaking. That being said, truth is still truth at the end of the day, and this thing is painted beautifully. And while we're on the topic of truth, here's a hard one to swallow, so to speak. Flame Toys Victory Leo or Victory Saber. This is a disaster of a figure, and yet it's also one of the most well painted. So it is what it is. And lastly, a late entry, 3 zeros Nemesis Prime. I was really smitten with the paint job on this figure, as you just saw recently. And the winner is going to go to Firmament. And look, I don't feel right about this. I know that technically I should give it to Star Saber or Victory Saber, but I just can't. It can't stand up. You know I get worked up when figures can't stand up, and it's super expensive. So the Firmament is a striking figure in regards to his paint job. Truly phenomenal. It's in a league of its own. It stands out. It works in tandem or in concert with its own sculpt to provide high quality presence, in spite of how I feel about a lot of the things they've done. Moving on to best sculpt, once again, a category we can kind of breeze through. One of the entries is definitely going to be MMC's Rung for the reasons we've kind of already discussed. But one of the challenges I think the third party often has is getting the character to come through in the sculpt. This one doesn't have that problem. Second, the X-Transbots Quintesson. I have a number of feelings regarding this, specifically in regards to its price point and the gimmicks and all of those things. But what this figure does manage to do is get the head sculpts right. And those head sculpts are goofy, and you have to walk a fine line to make them accurate and also make them look somewhat cool in the size and scale and the 3D presence, and I think it did nail that. So credit where credit's due there. Next, 3-0 Soundwave and Ravage. Looks just like it should. For any Soundwave collector, a must-have. For any fan of this design, a must-have. Just a beautifully sculpted thing. They know how to sculpt a piece, there's no doubt about it. Next is Magic Square's Menasor. They've managed to capture the character, they managed to embody it, they managed to give you a number of different display options for it, and all of them seem like smart choices as opposed to forced choices. Lots of G1 show nods, lots of toy nods, lots of sculpted details, lots of sauce, just a really well done piece in the sculpt department. And lastly, Flame Toys Victory Leo, because it looks amazing as long as you glue it in place. And because of that, I have to make it the winner, because what this thing is sculpt-wise truly is better than the rest, in my opinion. You just have to, like I said, glue it in place. So if you get a little bit of Gorilla Glue, you can have one of the most striking looking things to come out this year on your shelf. Just don't spare on the Gorilla Glue. You already spent $800 for it. You know what I mean? Moving on to transformation, and we'll start with the Magic Square Shockwave. It was just a really fun and enjoyable transformation, and I'm not used to having a whole lot of fun during transformation, so it was almost like surprising to me, and I was like, how could it get any better than this? And then I experienced the New Age transformation, and the way that they tucked the whole barrel into the chest was just one of those masterpiece moments, even though it's a Legends figure that I just haven't experienced in a long, long time. So both of those deserve their spot on this list. Next would be X-Transbots Groove. I don't expect X-Transbots transformations to be fun, enjoyable, and intuitive. I certainly don't expect anybody making any transformation where it has to go from a robot to a motorcycle to be that either. And this one is, surprisingly so. So it's on there. Planet X Shockwave, once again, just a return to form for them. They usually have pretty fun and intuitive transformations. And the same goes for our last candidate, which is the MMC Chrome Dome. Just sort of MMC doing what MMC does. I couldn't decide between this and a couple others from MMC. I just wanted them represented because I knew who the winner would be, and it wasn't going to be MMC. It was going to be that New Age Shockwave. And once again, just because it gave me that moment that I haven't experienced in some time that I miss experiencing, so to speak, in regard to the engineering of a figure and specifically transformation wise. Like, it's just like, whoa, they did it. I can't believe they did it, but they did it. It's not a backpack. It's not an accessory. It's stored inside the figure. Bravo. Now, at the request of my friend Todd R., we now offer the Viewers' Choice Award, where you guys could vote, and I had the panel open for 5 hours on my Facebook for which third-party figure you guys thought were the best. So I tallied all the votes, and this is just your votes counted for those that voted. And the nominees are Deformation Space Starscream. Like I said, fan favorite for sure, certainly in light of the Takara masterpiece that preceded it. New Age Shockwave. No surprise there for me. It's a phenomenal effort. Robot Paradise Acoustic Wave. Once again, no surprise to me. Certainly see how people could and should like it. It just doesn't do it for me. New Age has another entry with their Devastator, which I found interesting. I do think it's a good Devastator, but I have a lot of issues with a lot of the bots, specifically the scrappers. So like, it surprises me that it was so high on the list. And last entry that only edged out its competitor by 1 vote, I might add, was the MMC Orion Pax. This was a good figure. It just kind of wasn't good enough to enter a lot of top 5s for me, but it really was a good figure and a really well-painted figure specifically for MMC. And the winner goes to Deformation Space Starscream, which doesn't surprise me in the least. The situation that arose between the Takara release and then this subsequently thereafter, the price points, etc. There's a lot to unpack there. We've tried to unpack it on numerous platforms here. It doesn't surprise me that this is what the people would put their kind of heart behind. Makes perfect sense to me. And then the last category of the award show, historically, the final one, the big one, so to speak, third-party company of the year. Our first entry is going to be for 3-0. Not only did they release a number of really stellar products throughout the year, in terms of quality, you can debate some of the aesthetic choices, but in terms of quality, but they've gone ahead and gone the extra step to tease an upcoming line of non-transforming figures with their own designs at a very affordable price point that's making everybody kind of look sideways at Flame Toys. And that's what they need to be recognized for, is they are making the temperature a little bit warmer for a pretty big boy on campus. Our next entry is for New Age, just an extremely prolific company with a pretty stellar reputation and a level of consistency that makes most third-party companies jealous, with Sculpt, paint, and numerous releases all on their side. Now, on the opposite end of that, Fans Toys still manages to make their way into the discussion this year. Not a whole lot of releases out of them this year, though. A far cry from what we've experienced in 2020. But in typical Fans Toys fashion, every release they put out this year caused big discussion. Hopefully healthy. I know some have been unhealthy, but you can save that for somebody else. And on top of that, I've had a ton of reveals throughout the year, too, to kind of keep excitement going. Now, to piggyback off of that, X-Transbots is entering the realm this year. And they're entering because they did have a couple fumbles, right? Coot was a pretty big fumble, and the shoulders of Fuzz, specifically in regard to transformation, was a pretty big fumble as well. However, the amount of product that they have put out this year, along with the amount of reveals that they have consistently put out this year, in a time where people appreciate having a little bit to get excited for, specifically in the masterpiece arena, needs to be acknowledged. Along with that, there's been a pretty active communication with the fan base and the consumer base, which has supposedly included a fair amount of transparency. And our last entry is Magic Square. Their Minosaur is impressive. And once again, throughout the year, have released a number of consistent figures, released quality-wise, throughout the year. Now, that quality may not be my cup of tea, but I know that obviously it is someone's. And the fact that they can continue to strike while the iron's hot with release after release, making all the Legends fans pretty happy, I imagine, needs to be acknowledged. But there can only be one winner, and I'm going with X-Transbots. And to be fair, I'm not necessarily going with them for their releases. However, I do love their groove, and I think that their entire G1 Stunnicon releases this year have been great. Their Minosaur left a lot to be desired. Their Quintesson was great, but very pricey. But what they have done this year is something that I've applauded them for all year, while often being pretty harsh on some of their releases, specifically their Minosaur and Quintessons. However, for a masterpiece fan, which finds the well consistently drying up and a lack of battery in any of it, I found that X-Transbots, with their more risky reveals, like the Omnibots, and of course Runabout and Runamuck, along with a number of very high quality pieces and consistent communication and transparency in theory, with their consumer base, earns them this spot this year. If I had to give it to a runner-up, it would be 3-0, just because I'm excited about what they're doing. New Age probably deserves it more than 3-0, but I'm not as excited with what they're doing.
And there you have it. And this happens every year. I'm sure there's some people that couldn't be more upset and some people that couldn't be more happy with my choices, but they're my choices to be had. Last week, somebody disagreed with me on something and then was like, well, I'm going to make my own video about it. And I was like, yeah, please do. I'm not trying to prevent you from making any videos of, you know what I mean? Whatever, dude. I didn't have you in mind when I did it, I guess. Anyway, holidays are coming up. I hope you're all being mentally sound. You know, holidays can be a tough time for people with loss and all that kind of stuff, and it's been a crazy couple of years. Hopefully we're coming out of it. So my thoughts and feelings are with you. And with that being said, I'll be back next week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.